So let's all take a seat. We will continue. Thank you so much. So I hope you all had a wonderful morning and you enjoyed the program so far. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Pascal. I'm the VPI of swimsa, which means I take care of all of our members, amongst which are also a lot of associations all throughout Switzerland. And as it is our tradition, we give them speaking time at the SMSC to present themselves and what they do throughout the year. Now, as Alme already mentioned in his welcome speech, one big topic this year for us was getting back active after a very passive period of COVID. And from my experience, what I can tell is that they have done great so far in getting back in the game of in-person events, whether it be conferences, charity runs. Thank you so much. It's a very wide palette, and I'm really happy that they're here today to present this to you. Now, as we don't have all day, they only have 2 minutes speaking time, which is kind of our fault, so sorry for this. But if you're interested by a project that they have been doing, don't hesitate to go up to them either during the project fair or just throughout the event. They're very happy to answer your questions. So without further ado, I will introduce the first project, or let them introduce themselves.
So, hello, I am Leo, and this is Estelle. We will be presenting ASC, Action Santé Communautaire, which is an association part of the global health project of the AMG, which is the Geneva Medical Student Association. Our favorite subject is community health, and the main is give visibility to vulnerable social groups with different projects. The purpose is also to support students who invest and inquire about multiple health problematics.
So we have four different projects. The first one is La Branche, which purpose is to raise awareness on links between health and environmental changes through education of healthcare professionals and to the general public, and also to think about the sustainability in the healthcare system. And we give a workshop today, so don't hesitate to come by. The second project is SAME for Santé Mentale, which support medical students' mental health and give support and also to raise awareness on medical students' mental health problems. And the third one is Meds Explained, who promotes positive and inclusive sexual and education through their Instagram accounts. They have a lot of public and organize other events to the general public. And last but not least, La Roseraie is a center who gives workshop for people who don't speak French, and in particular for migrant persons. Voilà. Have a nice day.
So, hello, I'm Elsa, and with Allegra we are very happy to present you METIS, which is a student movement working against inequality in health access. Our vision is a world in which everyone has equal access to healthcare. That seems a little bit like a presidential speech, but what do we do concretely? So as an association, we value interprofessionality. That's why we collaborate with nurse students for our 7 projects. Our first project is Formation, that organizes speeches open to public to raise awareness about inequalities in health access. Then we have our project Interprète, that recruits students to translate for free medical consultation. And our project Breaking the Silence organizes sign language courses for medical staff and medical students. And our project Jeff helps young immigrants to integrate professionally here in Switzerland.
We also have 3 international projects. The first one is Kalwa, which helps children and adolescents living with HIV/AIDS in Tanzania by organizing activity days twice a month in Shirati and Ukerewe. We also have Suerte in Ecuador, where the goal is to destigmatize and educate the population about the tuberculosis. And last but not least, we have a baby project this year, the Togo project, which collaborates with the local association Africa Smile in order to fight against poverty and improve healthcare access for children there. So I know it's a lot of information, so don't hesitate if you have any question, come to us. And this year we would love to expand METIS to other universities. So if you would like to open any one of these projects to your uni, please come to us and we can talk about it. Thanks for the attention.
So, hello everyone, we are Tine and Maurizio, and we are very excited to present Achtung Liebe to you today. We do sexual education and educating pupils aged 11 to 18. Our topics in a regular morning include anatomy, contraception, sexual orientation, STIs, pornography, and many more. My favorite part about it is that we can answer any questions that students may have. And since there's no teacher around, we can create this nice peer-to-peer atmosphere.
Yes, and as a part of Achtung Liebe, you get to participate in sexual health promotion. You can improve your teaching skills by breaking down subjects. This is actually incredibly useful if you have to explain something complicated to your patient later on. This is a nice exercise for it. You can connect with like-minded students and build great friendships, and you may even find a girlfriend, like some of us have. You can, at the beginning, participate in one of our fun workshops and advance your understanding of love, relationships, and sexuality. If you want to join us, take out your phones and just look for Achtung Liebe. This is when our next training workshop is. And come check us out at the project fair this evening. We brought 300 condoms and snacks. It's going to be a great time. Thanks.
So, hello everybody, I'm Luca and I'm representing EROS. We are a students association from Lausanne and we are interested in the topics of sexual education and sexual health. So what do we do? In a few words, we organize conferences and workshops about sexual health and sexual education. Notably, in March, we have our Sexuality and Gender Week, during which every day for 1 week we organize a different event like a conference, workshop, party, whatever. We have our trans project, which aims to spread awareness about trans patients to first-year students, medical students in Lausanne. And we also organize parties, which are really cool, so you should come if you have the occasion to come to Lausanne. You can follow us on Instagram. It's eros_Lausanne. We have a lot of interesting posts in order to spread awareness about sexual health. And we also have a nice website you can check us on. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Elinor and this is Simone and we are here to represent Mero Switzerland. Mero currently consists of 7 sections all over Switzerland, which we are very proud of. And we work together with the Blutspende SRK, so Transfusion Swiss, and as well as the League for Hope. And our goal is to spread awareness about blood stem cell donation. So we have different ways of doing that. Fundraising is one important part, and Simone is talking about that later. But we also try to just inform people about what blood stem cell donation is, because a lot of people don't know it. And there are a lot of false information in the population. To give you an instance, in the German parts, we always have the confusion between bone marrow and spinal cord, because in German it's Rückenmark and Knochenmark, and people are very afraid that they can get paralyzed if they donate. So this is something we try to counteract. And as you can see, there's still a big hole in the map, which is where Lugano is. So if any of you are interested in starting a new section for Mero, please join us later at the projects fair, and we are more than happy to give you information on how to do that.
So as promised, I will talk about money. The registration as a potential blood stem cell donor is free, but the lab doesn't work for free, so we need money to support the Swiss registry. How we do that? Some of you may know the Leukemia Charity Run. We did this also last year as a national project. And it will happen on the 30th of April and 1st of May. You can go on. And the goal is collect as many kilometers as you can. So you can go for a walk, go for a hike, go for your usual jogging round and track your kilometers. And then you sign in and you help us, because every kilometer will be paid by our sponsors. Yeah, register here. So scan the QR code. If you want to help even more, tell your friends, tell your family. And if you want to help more, then find your own sponsors, also friends and family. It's really easy through our registration website. And if you have any questions, any doubts, don't hesitate to contact us or come to the project fair. Thank you so much.
So this ties in perfectly with our subject. As you might know, diabetes or smoking just about doubles your risk of death, but having an elite cardiovascular health, so belong to the top 2.5% of the population, offers you about a 5-fold reduction in all-cause mortality when compared to below average peer. This is attainable through training and really awesome. Exercise can provide great benefits to you and your future patients. So me and Maria are part of JSEMS. It stands for Junior Sports and Exercise Medicine Switzerland. And our board consists of some junior doctors, but foremost, med students from every single faculty of Swiss universities. As an association, we strive to increase awareness and promote knowledge about both the preventative power of exercise and also how to best take care of its most effective advocates, professional and semi-professional athletes. We also aim to aid students interested in this field to optimally plan their career and generally strive to promote a multidisciplinary approach in sports medicine. How do we accomplish this? Maria will quickly tell you something about that.
Thank you. How do we reach these goals? So firstly, by our main event in the autumn, the Students' Day. It's an annual conference with lectures in the morning and workshops in the afternoon about sports and exercise medicine. Further on, we have online events, like the last one was about a day as a doctor in the Olympic Village. Then we have the opportunity to go with a sports physician and get information. We have also international exchange with all the above ones. And we are starting to implement SEM into the curriculum of each university in Switzerland. So
the best way to stay up to date with what we're offering you is to follow us on our social media, and also don't be shy to come up and talk to us at the project fair. We're super happy to engage in some very interesting conversation with each and every one of you. Thank you, and I'll give it back to Pascal.
Thank you so much to all the projects that were here presenting. And now the good news is, this was only half of it. So there's a second slot for the project presentation this afternoon, where we will hear a lot more of these exciting stories of active students that take matters into their own hand and become active and stand up for a cause that they believe in. In the meantime, we're going to continue our program with a very interesting lecture that follows just now. And then after, there is lunchtime, if I'm properly informed. So yes, stay tuned.
Hello? Hi! Hi, I'm Sarah. While we get the next lecture set up, we're gonna do an energizer. So I need everybody to stand up. Come on. Plant your feet on the ground, be centered, be present. Now, repeat after me. Ayo. Ayo. Louder. Ayo. 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 Beautiful, amazing. You guys are so good at this. Now, I want you to find a partner, just a person standing next to you, and turn to them. Look into each other's eyes. If you have a group of 3, that works too. It's not ideal, but just look at each other. Now that your vocal cords are warmed up and your brain is active, you are going to count down from 100 in steps of 7, and you're going to yell the numbers at your partner. Ready? Go! Yes, keep going, keep going, keep going. You got this. Beautiful. Stop. All right. Guys, I know this is fun, but it's lecture time now. Oi! All right. Thank you, everybody, for participating. Give yourselves a hand. You guys are amazing. All right. Enjoy the next lecture. Oh, also, FYI, at the end of the hallway, there's like a big frame with a face in front of it that y'all can use to take pictures and stuff. It's very cool. Just like FYI. Bye.
All right. We're coming to the second lecture of today. I have next to me Professor Pietro Majno-Hurst. He was responsible for the surgery module in our university and is chief of surgery in the Civico Ospedale. We approached him because we are very aware that he's always on the bike. He also has his bike in this room right now. So he's very passionate about climate consciousness and climate change. So
thank you very much. It's a pleasure for me to be here with you. I have a disclaimer. Here I'm the professor of surgery. I am invested of an institutional role, so I had to water down slightly my environmental interest because of not to mix the two things too much. In Geneva, where I was coming before, I was much more active as a cycling militant and engaged all the doctors of the hospital to vote in favor of cycling paths. And for the first time, the hospital engaged strongly in that, but more interesting, in civil disobedience, which I think is a must. So with the permission of my director in the hospital, I went around posting health warnings on posters, advertisement posters. And he said he would pay the caution if I were ever imprisoned. But in fact, nobody imprisoned me, unfortunately, because I would have liked it, because it would have made more noise. And in fact, but at least in Geneva, how many of you are from Geneva? Yeah, in Geneva, you will vote against advertisement soon. In fact, you will vote for keeping the law against advertisement that we, in fact, promoted against too much advertising in public spaces. And we obtained that at the beginning with civil disobedience, which I think should be a must. You will see later on in the talk. I'm extremely worried about our planet. I think if I treated my patients as if our politicians and our elites to which we belong, they treat the climate, I would be in prison immediately. I would be struck off the registry, and I would be in prison. And it's mind-blogging the irresponsibility of our politicians and the inadequacy of our laws on this matter. And of course, the budget is not limited to CO2. I think we are using up the capital of nature rather than living on the interests of nature. And the capital of nature is not just CO2 and the climate, it's many other things. I would suggest you go to this very good article in Nature that defines a safe operating space for humanity in many fields. And the concept of the donut economy of Kate Rowlands, that is a book that is well worth reading. But today I will not discuss these items one by one in detail. I will try to give you a tool which I think has helped my awareness of what's happening. And I will share this tool. It's the first time I do it. And so will be, let's say, will forgive me. It's for this first attempt, it is not clear, but I'll try to make it as clear as possible. And we'll have some discussion at the end. We normally, for the environment, use this metaphor. You know, it's the sustainable development stool where there is one leg, the economy, one leg, the environment, one leg, social justice. And if they're all in equilibrium, we can stand on that rather safely. And on that, I've been sitting for a while and nothing was happening. I think this metaphor is completely inadequate, and I will try to change it with a new metaphor. It's important because we know exactly what we must do to at least limit for the global warming to 1.5 degrees by 2050. And we know how to do the things that we need to do, which is very good news. If we did not know how to do the things that we need to do, it would be terrible. If we did not have contraception, if we could not use solar power, if we could not use alternative energies, if we could not have an efficient banking system, it would be absolutely chaos. In fact, we have all these things. We have all the tools that is the first time that humanity has it available. I mean, just the example of contraception, it's amazing. And yet we don't do them. Why don't we do them? Why are we so inefficient at doing them? And you see here the curve of decarbonizing the economy for each dollar of GDP, what we should be doing, which is getting it down like that, and in fact, we are way off the mark. And this is not a leftish graph, this is PricewaterhouseCoopers who defined this. And it's even worse now. Awareness of what's happening. The concept that I will try to share with you, which has been very useful for me in thinking about those things for the past, let's say, 15 to 20 years, and is sort of coagulating to something useful, not just for this, but for other things, is the concept of forces that push us in the wrong directions. There are many forces at different levels that push us in the wrong direction. And we are surrounded by these sad forces. They need an active effort to be countered. They are not invincible. If you analyze one by one, they can be surmounted. But you have to be aware of these forces because most of them are invisible as such. And my analogy comes from Spinoza. I hope you have not read Spinoza. When I bought Spinoza on my wife's Kindle, I started reading it and I returned it in 5 minutes as a wrong buy because it was so incomprehensible that I could not read it. And Spinoza, you have to get it, very interesting philosophy, but digested by the people who have spent their life on it. There is no chance that you will read on your own the Ethics of Spinoza. That was Goethe's favorite book. He had it in his pocket, but he was Goethe, I am Pietro, and the differences. But there are some very, very good people who have studied intensively Spinoza, and Spinoza called le passioni triste, the passion, the sad passions that keep us from going to realizing our tendency to happiness. For him, happiness was amor Dei, but God was nature for him. And for him, the contemplation of nature, the perfect contemplation of nature, having nature coming inside you, was his form of perfect joy. And things that, there were feelings that would keep you from realizing yourself in this perfect joy, and he called them the sad passions. And he had 4 sad passions. In fact, I think it's not just the sad passions in ourselves, but there are in society, in the way we've constructed our relationship, sad forces that keep us from doing the things that we want and need to do. And I will analyze these 3 levels a little bit on the sad passions of Spinoza, to which I've added a couple. Then a few of how we've built our interactions. I will take the example of my own job as a head of service in the Department of Surgery. And last, how I built our society, the sad forces that run in society and I think keep us from going in the right direction. So for Spinoza, the way we are built, the sad passions, and I will keep it for passions because they are inner forces, fear, including the fear of missing out, which is something that is available to us to an extremely high degree, because our society, our modern society, has allowed us to have so many possibilities that we try to keep open to the very last minute. That is completely new. And Spinoza, at his time, had just fear of being attacked, etc. But today, we have one greater permeating fear, which is the fear of missing out in the many possibilities that we have of using our time. Hate, I don't have too much of that, but some people do have it, and we see what's happening now in the war. Envy, a lot of it in my profession. You always want something else. Shame, terrible, sad passion. Never humiliate somebody, because otherwise his behavior will change radically. It's a very sad passion. Pride, which he did not put, which I see a lot of in my job. It's something that makes you make mistakes. Surgical mistakes are often a question of pride. Comfort is a very sad passion that at the time of Spinoza was not accessible. It's unimaginable, the kind of comfort that we have access to today. This comfort is toxic. This strive for comfort is what makes us fat, lazy, whatever. And it's something very, very new in our society. At the time of Spinoza, the discomfort was so high. I advise you to read a beautiful book about Spinoza. Is a novel, Irving Yalom, The Spinoza Case. I don't know whether some of you have read it, but in fact it's a very good access to Spinoza, and written beautifully in English, but well translated too. A notable feature of Spinoza's sad passions is that a bit of them is actually rather constructive. If you have some fear, some envy, and some pride and some strive for comfort, it makes you do things which are in fact useful for everybody. But you have to contain it to a very gentle level. If you let them spike high, then they interfere with your happiness and with your working habits. I will take some example now of our environment, and take my environment, of working environment, about the sad forces of how we've built our interaction. Becoming head of a department, I noticed how hierarchy is a sad force. I believed that people would tell me what they thought. They don't. I asked them to tell me what they feel, whether what I do is right or wrong. They don't. Unless I take a very active action to decrease the sad force of hierarchy, people will not tell me what they think and will make mistake. I remember 2 years ago, I told a nurse to do something which I thought was perfectly right. And I asked her, are you comfortable with it? And she said, yes. And of course, the next day, she told me that she was not at all comfortable in doing it, but she took all night to tell me, and the thing by then had been done. So you cannot count on people telling you, because of this hierarchy, to deny obedience and to give you feedback. For me, it was a huge lesson. The other one that we've introduced as a sad force, and we experience as a sad force, is complexity. We live in a society of huge complexity, and complexity always increases. When we see something that is complex, we tend to see the problems and then to correct them with even more complexity. The natural thing is correcting these, and you see this is how administration becomes more and more and more important. I was educated in a health system, the British health system, in which there were no financial constraints. There was no finance. The finance department did not exist. Rewarding remuneration of healthcare acts. Operations, a patient would come to the hospital, they would be operated, they would go home, they would go to their GP, and there was no money exchanged in the NHS. The NHS was working with 6.5% of the GDP, giving very good quality to many. It would have been just enough to increase it to 8 to 9%, and it would have been beautiful. Comes Margaret Thatcher, and she says, money should follow the patient. Boom, administration, complexity, administration, complexity, etc., havoc. But you see it in all the things that you will try, all the projects that will try to put forward, that complexity will creep in and work on its own as a sad force and make things more and more complex. I advise you to read a book by Tainter. I've put it there. I'll give my presentation and you can have it later for the bibliography. Tainter, The Collapse of Complex Society. Tainter shows that a bit of complexity has returns. More and more, the curve goes down, and eventually it becomes so paralyzing and completely counterproductive that the system collapses. So that is one thing that in your job, I have in my job, I have to constantly be aware that you have to put an effort, an active effort to decrease complexity. If you do something, then at the end, try to put in a midget, un lutin simplificateur, a midget that simplifies things, and try to simplify your project. Level 3, which is the one that concerns most the problem of climate change and environmental degradation. And I will talk only about 4 sad forces. But once you've understood the concept of a sad force, you will see that it can be applied to many others, and you can play the exercise yourself. And I will talk about the 4, the free market with invisible hand. You know what Adam Smith's invisible hands, that sums up all the collective selfishness into a common good. The remuneration of capital, there is a mantra saying that wealth distributes downwards, the trickle-down economy, and in fact, it does not work. In the economy, it's capital that hoovers up wealth from down below up above. That's a very strong sad force. Debt is another one, and addiction to GDP is a 4th one I will analyze. And this has not been always the case. These things, how we live them now, were built in the 70s and the 80s by this mortiferous couple, very sad force for them. Free market as a sad force. What we see in the free market when the payment, the solvability leads what happens in social exchanges is absolutely terrible, because who has no money does not exist. There was a Novartis manager who fortunately had to resign, who said that India is a country of 20 million people, because those were the 20 million who could pay the drugs. The other 800 millions, they did not exist. There is a very good documentary called L'Île aux Fleurs, which is an island outside Rio de Janeiro, where some agricultural landlord owns pigs. And pigs, because they are owned by somebody, eat so much better than people who are not owned by anybody. And this is typical of this concept that if you have no financial power, and if you don't belong to anybody, you simply do not exist. What has no price has no value. That's another very sad force of the free market. And it leads to huge, this time, environmental, not just social injustice. The sea has no price. The bees have no price, so they have no value. the market does not consider the preservation of the integrity of the sea, of the bees, of the climate, has no value. And there is the concept of attaching a monetary value to these things so that they can be considered as capital. It's a double-edged sword. We can discuss about it. But it's amazing that if you lead the free hand to administer things, if it has not a price, if it's not a commodity, it will not be taken into account. You have to correct it actively. And if the laws do not correct it actively, it will degrade. So, very sad force that you have to correct actively, because otherwise the thing will simply collapse. What has a price has too much value. I today have to negotiate the salaries of my co-workers who are attracted by the private sectors. Otherwise, they completely desertify my department. And hell, what a pity, because the private sector raises the price and all my good people are hoovered into the private sector because they have too much value. And in fact, a value which is inordinate compared to our social role. But we are put into a free market competition, and very sad force, I have to raise the salary, and the hospital has not the money enough to do that. Otherwise, they go in the private sector, they cream off the good cases, they operate them there, they make their money, and I remain without nothing. Terrible, sad force. The divide of the high salary to the lower salary in a company, Plato said it should be 1 in 4, the difference in wealth, not in salaries, because salaries were not at the time something that was considered. But Plato used to say that in the Republic, the richest and the poorest should have 1 in 4. There was a debate in Italy, I'm Italian, of a very enlightened chief of company, Adriano Olivetti, of the Olivetti machines, who said that the general director of Fiat, who was earning 12 times as much as his laborers, was scandalous. And today, UBS is 300. In my personal bank, the Banca Alternativa, it's 1 in 4. The CEO earns 4.1 times what the cleaning lady does. And this has something that has gone out of hand completely without nobody, in fact, being very much in favor of it. It just happened. It happened because it is a sad force. Unless you do something against it, it will happen. Another sad force, the remuneration of capital. This is something we consider absolutely normal. Max Weber, he wrote The Protestant Ethics and Capitalism, and he said interest has always been there, is great. I lend the couple of pigs to my neighbor, and after a year they had their little piglets, and when he gives the pigs back to me, he would give me 1 or 2 piglets, and everybody's happy. That's normal. It's completely justifiable. But this was yesterday. Yesterday, you would put the 2 pigs under the oak, they would eat the glands, you would bring some work and the water, the sun would do the rest, the pigs would do the excrement and fertilize the oak, and it was a very close, small circle with small gains. You just had the 2 piglets, but in fact, everybody was getting richer, thanking to the sun, to the water, and to some labor that you would put into it. Look what happens today. This is the interest that you get, much more money, but you have to inject huge amount of petrol. You have to deal with huge amount of excrements, and you know that the animals on Earth weigh about 7 times the weight of humanity, the animals we eat, and they make 7 times as much feces. And the nitrogen that we have in water, in soils, etc., is becoming a huge problem because we are transferring the fertility, basically the fertility of the Amazon rainforest that we cut down to grow soy, importing this nitrogen in Bretagne, where they feed it to pigs, and it percolates down into the soil of Brittany. And this is why, because we inject so much petrol into the system and produce a huge amount of money, of course, but the thing that we have to do now is to crank this circle back. We have to inject money to reverse the system so we can put back petrol or CO2 into the earth. And of course, cranking the system back requires effort, capital, and a lot of work. Another sad force is debt. Debt, I suggest you to read this wonderful book, Debt, the First 5,000 Years. And the usual thing is barter came first, then money, then credit and debt. No. There are very good historical reasons to believe that barter is only among people who never see each other again. You go into an island, you exchange glass beads against statues or whatever, take your canoe, go away, never seen, great. Everybody thinks that you swindled the other, and you never see it again. Credit was much, much earlier. Is a way of knitting relation to the other people. And there are societies in which this, in our society as well, in which this underlying credit is so knitted into our social relationship that cutting the debt and the credit is considered extremely impolite. If you come into an African village and your neighbor lends you 5 eggs, if you return 5 eggs, means I don't want to have nothing to do with you. You have to return either 6, so he will see you again, or 5, so I will see you again. But if you give exactly the same, and this was born way before money, which was invented basically to feed the armies of Alexander. He wanted his army to be fed. He wanted taxes to return with the money that he would give to his soldiers so that they could buy the food and the peasant could pay the taxes. And the money was that. Today, debt has become so pervasive, so extensive, that it has produced enslavement of millions of people. You know about the Indian peasants who commit suicide because they are so indebted that they can't pay anything for their family. The permeation of OGMs, how do you say OGM in English? Yeah, exactly. Is in Romania comes from the fact that the peasant doesn't want to use them, but he's in debt. And when he's in debt, he has to say yes. There is a beautiful film that I advise you to see, it's on the internet, called We Feed the World. And it opens with a peasant in Austria who said, I don't understand what's happening. When I was a child, my father had 1/10 of the land I owned. We were 10 in the family, and we were rich. Today, I have 10 times the land he owned. We are 2 in the family, and we are poor. What's happened? And what's happened is debt. The fact that he's constantly in debt because he has to insure his crops, because he has to buy his seeds, etc. And debt is something that we've let completely go out of hand. Monetary creation by banks. I think you've heard about that because in Switzerland we managed to vote for that. You know that today more than 90% of the money is created as debt money by high street banks when they give you a mortgage. And this money disappears when you pay the mortgage, but the work that you do to pay the interest, this remains. And we have allowed banks to create money, to print money, des falsaires on in French, as regularized money makers, money printers. And we've allowed this to happen as a sad force. It's amazing that we allowed this. Go on the website called Positive Money and you will see. I hope we'll be back to voting it. Just 1/4 of the Swiss understood what was happening. I don't know what you voted. I engaged myself in this campaign. Unfortunately, we lost. In Geneva, we won, but unfortunately, we lost. Last sad force is addiction to growth, GDP. The conference could have been on this. It's something that has really taken my mind for many years. You know that economic growth is measured as a growing GDP. And this is a terrible indicator. Indicators are a way to, or key performance indicators are a way to insert forces into a relationship, into working habits. I mean, in my hospital, we have to discharge patients before midday. And that has become an indicator of quality. And so the result is that we drive towards this indicator, which in theory is a good one, but in fact has adverse effects. So putting in an indicator that you have to follow is a very good way to create a force, which may be sad or happy. GDP is a very bad indicator because GDP reflects the exchange, but not the amount of wealth that you have. If you have a cherry tree and you cut it to get more easily the cherries and to burn the wood, this year's GDP is higher. Next year, to hell, it won't count. Until the last fish I fish out of the lake, my GDP increases. When there are no more fishes, the GDP doesn't care. We are incapable of increasing GDP. In theory, it could be possible, but in practice, we are still incapable of increasing the GDP without using more matter and more energy. And this is a complete nonsense in a world that needs to decrease the consumption of matter and energy. It's the mantra to avoid the distribution. Of course, while economical growth happens, everybody earns much. The rich earns more, the poor a little bit less, but everybody increases their wealth. It works for a while, but you cannot have infinite growth in a finite environment. If we do as we should do today, and which is obvious to doctors, why not obvious to many economists, I don't know, but to doctors who don't think that growth is always a good thing and that growth one day should stop. And for me, growth of cholesterol, of sugar, of weight, of tumors is not a good thing. At a certain point, growth should stop. And doctors generally understand that very well. Economists don't understand that very well. Today, it's obvious that we should concentrate on an economy that ensures what's needed. As Gandhi said, there is enough if we want to supply to the needs of everybody, not enough if we want to supply to the desires of everybody. But if you focus on an economy that concentrated of need on the useful and on some of the agreeable, and we can discuss what is this agreeable, and cuts off the noxious and the useless, this GDP the GDP of this economy will decrease. It's obvious that you will decrease. If you want to concentrate on this economy, that this is the economy that we need, the GDP must decrease. And it's not an aim in itself. The aim in itself should be this economy that concentrated on the needed, on the useful, and on some of the agreeable. And we can discuss about this some. It will decrease. And so tell me how I can increase my GDP and have an economy that will ensure this. I can't, nobody can. Think just a thing, planned obsolescence. The fact that the beautiful telephone that I use, in fact, it does not work after 4 years. Today we have the technology to make it lasting for 50. I mean, the violin I play has been made 300 years ago. Humanity knows how to make things that last forever, that last for us, and it would be perfectly possible to just pay the maintenance of these things and the upgrade rather than simply take the 100 kilos of raw materials and the 2 tons of raw materials that are making my computer. If there were a law stipulating that obsolescence should not, and we should guarantee and repair things for 10 years, it would be a huge economy of raw materials and energy. But this law does not exist. You see, this is exactly what I'm saying about a sad force that has to be countered. Nobody makes this law. And so this sad force permeates, and we change our telephone because after 4 years, it does not work. Induced desires, the same. People are made to believe that they are what they buy, not what they play, what they read, what they discuss, what they create. And do you see a lot of advertisement about music schools, about classics to read, even about audiobooks, which are my addiction? I don't see the advertisements, but you see the advertisements about cars. And a car should change. There is no reason that a car should be changed every 4 or 5 years. No reason whatsoever. There is no reason why a car should be owned by anybody. It stays parked in the street for 98% of the time. There is no reason for that. And how do we get to that? We get it with laws, not with voluntarism. If we don't have the laws that render planned obsolescence impossible, advertising much more limited, and whatever, we will never get to that. Against the macrostat forces, there are many recipes. We know what we have to do against these things. Let's say one obvious thing. When I earn some money, this activity has an environmental impact. And humanity is very good at counting. We can know exactly what the environmental impact of this economical activity. Before you start making profit, pay the environmental externalities. It would be very easy to do. I can chip it in my credit card, and my credit card will tell me exactly what the cost of the thing I buy, not in terms of just the economy, but in terms of the environment. It would be very simple. If I buy meat, I have so many points of, in fact, entropy that are linked to it. But the law does not exist yet. Diminution of capital rather than remuneration of capital. It would be very easy. Vautrin, Balzac, Le Père Goriot, was saying that each capital, wealth, originates in a murder. Maybe it's not true, but we know exactly that each capital has a lot of CO2 inbuilt in it. And so, now that we've seen how this has led us, we should start taxing capital to the height of its environmental impact. It's something we don't do. Why don't we do it? We should ask it loud and strong, and we don't ask it. Rationing matter and energy. I think this is the key. It's a complete heresy because it's liberticide, right? In fact, rationing is the only way to have a limited resource distributed equitably. I used to be a liver transplant surgeon for 20 years. And in fact, a liver transplantation is rationed. And there is no big deal about it. We completely dealt with the fact that there is not enough for everybody. So we have to have rules. Who gets it, for what, and how. No problem. Why don't we have rationing? Rationing could be made clever. Rationing could be for matter and energy, but what kind of energy? I think we should ration entropy, in fact. Use as much as you want of your solar energy between 8 and 18, but in the evening, use just a certain amount of energy you choose, because this is not energy that comes for free. The other one comes for free. You want to use your energy because you are carnivorous and love it? Great, but please don't travel. You want to travel, please be a vegetarian. And it would not be impossible to do. It would be, in fact, very easy to do. We have all the means to do it. We just don't want to do it. So, to conclude, I changed the metaphor. At the beginning, I was sitting on the Sustainable Development stool, and I had the 3 legs, which are the 3 facets visible on the Rubik's Cube that I turned all the ways. And I could not make it fit until I saw that there were 3 hidden faces, which are inequality, comfort, and choice. We can discuss about choice. It's very interesting. And unless we compress the forces that lead us to inequality, lead us to hyper-comfort, and lead us to hyper-choice, we will not make it fit. If we make it fit, in the end, we'll have a world which is much more equitable, much more just, and I think much more beautiful. And I thank you for your attention.
Professor Majno, thank you very much for this stimulating lecture. I hope we brought the ball into rolling a bit. Do we have any questions or discussions that you want to start?
Hello. Thank you very much for your lecture. It was very interesting. You mentioned that sad forces can, in your eyes, only be overcome by changing the law. Do you think democracy is the right way forward, and what role does education play in your eyes?
Well, I'm a bit deaf, so...
Do I have to speak? Like, my question is...
Changing laws, yes, I understood that. Do you think what?
Do you think democracy, the way we have it in Switzerland, is the right way to go forward? And which way does education play, like, to change our attitude?
You've put the finger on the 2 crucial questions, for which I have, of course, my small answers. Democracy, in the way we have it, it's not good. There are, I don't know, some of you must know my wife in Geneva. You know her, yes. And so my wife has had given 2 ideas on discussion for that. One is the vote should count if you answer right to some questions that are asked to you at the moment of voting. So if you don't understand the problem, you vote, but your vote won't count. And we all agree on what is. That's very fine and smart. Mine was slightly more brutal. After 50, you should not vote on things that involve environmental issues. And because it's your problem, it's not our problem. I mean, I will die in 20 years, and probably the world will be... but you and my children, and you are much more concerned. And you see what happens. We are a gerontocracy. I mean, what happened in the States, if the States had voted just people until 50, they would have never had Trump. Never. But it's all the oldies that vote. So that would be one of the things that, but of course my wife's is much more intelligent. Education, yes. I think that's a key. And, but it's slow. But the problem is that we pay doctors so much more than we pay teachers and nurses. And I think education is the key to saving the world. I think there are 3 or 4 things. I think homosexuality may save the world because we'll make less children, and children that we want, and children that we want. My sister is married to a lady. They have 2 children, and they are really wanted. They don't just happen, children, to homosexual people. So I think, but apart from this joke, yes, very much so. The culture will save the world, if the world will be saved. If you spend your time reading, discussing, walking, rather than buying things, and your identity will be constructed on what you play and read and are, rather than what you buy, that's one of the key things. The problem is ignorance is a sad force. Unless you actively instruct people, ignorance would prevail. And I'm slightly elitist, maybe, but I believe that today we have to invest much more in, we saw the initiative for nursing care. We should have it the same for nursery schools and primary schools. And we should pay them much more and surgeons much less.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I have one comment on the reproduction. The most effective thing to reduce children per woman is access to reproductive rights for women and education about sexual health. So just as a comment, and 2 questions. The IPCC report, as you said, tells us a therapy to the diagnosis. It's systems change. So I wonder what you believe what systems change could look like. And the second question is...
I don't quite understand. The acoustic is terrible here.
Oh.
Can you come? For the questions, come closer.
Okay.
Because I lip read a lot.
Yes. Okay, so the IPCC report says that we need systems change to get to the 1.5 degree goal. So I would like to hear what your ideas for systems change are. And the second question is, because we have a full room of future doctors, what do you believe we can do for this topic?
So what would be my recipes to keep?
To systemic change, to change the system.
The systemic change I would start from is this. But we have to have the laws to allow this. And we should change the law. Rationing, of course, cannot happen without a law. Things that don't need a law and will be very easy to do is to have resurfacing all the hidden capital. Because let's say that from next month, the dollars will not be worth anything, and you just have the bollars. And so all people who have dollars, please come and change your dollars into bollars. All the capitals would resurface, and the huge amount that's hidden and avoids taxes would be one of the things. Monetary creation should belong only to the state and not to the banks. It should only be the central bank who does that. basically. That would be my first big systemic changes. That way. And the voting system, of course, because otherwise you will not get it. Did I answer?
My second question about the future doctors.
Future doctors, I think we have immense power because by saying that this is important and by not accepting the cognitive dissonance about taking up a health problem today to avoid that tomorrow is more severe, and requesting the same thing in our politicians as doctors, we have immense power. Then we have the elites, and the elites are the example. And the way you live as an elite is the way other people want to live. So doctors should stop owning expensive cars and doing all the distant travel and all that, which would seem usual. We have an incredible role as example. Limiting our financial expectations is another thing that we can do. And the last is politics. I think we should engage into politics, or into social movement. When I retire, I will probably do that, maybe not in a party, but use the leverage that's offered by the credibility that our profession has to ask for laws to change. Civil disobedience should be a must. And if a doctor does a civil disobedience action, it's taken seriously. He's not a lufoc. He's somebody who you trust to do a liver transplant, and he is putting stickers, is severely damaging the environment. Maybe there is something to it.
Thank you.
Do you understand me like this, or should I also come forward?
No, I understand you.
Okay, so I have a question regarding sustainability in healthcare, because that's kind of one thing every time I just visit a hospital and I see, mostly also in surgery, there is so much, like such an horrible trend towards like only using one-way material and just creating this immense load of waste. Do you have any like ideas of how you can also use more sustainability in healthcare systems?
I think the impact of that is relatively small. It is a huge symbolic impact. If you throw away things and with inconsiderate lightness, then that should not happen. And of course, you have to make and show that you care about all the things that you handle and privilege sterilizable things than single-use things. They cost more because labor costs more than matter and energy. And you have to push your administration to change that. In Geneva, we could. In Geneva, we started the plan to make the hospital more sustainable. And the biggest impact was medications. Medications are extremely climate intensive to produce. Then transportation, huge. 25% of Geneva's impact is people coming and going to work and visitors. Then it was things we buy, and in the things we buy, meat was extremely important. So in Geneva, they started offering very good alternative for vegetarian things. And go down, go down, go down, go down, until you get a very small symbolic impact of what you use in the operating room. But again, yes, you should say, I prefer to pay people than to pay matter and energy. And having progressively all the things that are single-use go away. But again, there is a sad force. The sad force is the monopoly of technological advances. And if the stapler I use is Ethicon, and it is a huge chunk of things, and they don't make it sustainable, unless I break patents. I mean, patents are a sad force, and we should fight against patents. I could not talk about all the sad forces that are around us, but intellectual property, as we have constructed it, it's a sad force.
Maybe one last comment or question?
Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Do you think we're going to make it? Do you think we're going to succeed on time?
As a surgeon, one of my heroes is Hunter, who said, "Why think? Just do the experiment." And I think we should try. I think we should try. We may well succeed. We are a bit late, but we may well succeed. I've seen more complex things being done than this. But we should want it with the right tools. And the right tools is not voluntarism, but changing the laws. We may succeed. Unfortunately, a huge step back with this war. I mean, we really didn't need it. This is a terrible, sad force. There was another question over there. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention for everyone who feels like called to and like passionate about this topic that the FMH, like our medical association, has published a strategy on environment and health and planetary health. And you can use that because they're calling upon a climate neutral health system. So use this strategy, like SWIMSA has been advocating for the strategy to happen. So you can go to your hospital and say, the Swiss Medical Association needs everyone to change and needs these changes. So join your associations. There are many possibilities to join, like green hospital movements or Health for Future or different projects happening in your universities. So yeah, and if you have any questions about these movements, you can come either to the people from Geneva who presented before, from La Branche, or to me. We're happy to discuss it.
I completely agree with you, but you can't get it unless you compress inequalities, comfort, and choice. That's something that translates even at much lower levels. In your daily life, you have to be greener, you have to compress comfort, inequalities, and choice. But compressing choice is not too difficult. In fact, choices are anxiogenous. If you keep choices so open to the end, it's very good to settle and go ahead. This is what you want to? Yeah, it's great.
Okay, we're not quite done yet. Just give me a couple more minutes to explain some stuff. First of all, for the Be Another Lab workshop, I have the list of those who won. Give me a second. Or one. Yeah, fine. Those are the people that won the spots in the Be Another Lab workshop. Please note down your times and be on time, because otherwise it will be a big mess. Yep. Then the workshop is going to be on the library in the first floor. I don't know, it's up there in the library. You need to show the slide again. Okay, there you go. I'll just let it be. Then we're going to have lunch now. The lunch is going to be on the other part of the courtyard in the C building at the Mensa outside. hold on to your food. It's very windy outside right now. And afterwards, in 1.5 hours, so at 2 o'clock, we're going to continue with a lecture. And please also be on time. And after the lecture, we're going to have, after the lecture, we're going to have the half an hour break, and then we're going to make a group photo. So don't just rush away. Stay in here. We're going to take a photo or explain where we're going to make the photo. Now, for the lunch, we have the lunch is over there. After the lunch, you have to take a tablet with the utensils and everything. After lunch, put them back into the drawers, and yeah, just don't make a big mess. It makes it easier for us. I think that's it. All right. I'll see you later. Bye.